They said love was supposed to last forever, but forever ended the night he sold her. Mara had spent 7 years believing that marriage was about patience, loyalty, and forgiveness. She had stood beside Daniel through poverty, through hunger, through promises that never came true. She cooked for him, worked in the fields, and stayed silent when he came home smelling of alcohol and someone else's perfume. But nothing prepared her for the day he looked at her like she was worth a number. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from. Your city, your country, maybe the weather outside. And if stories like this one remind you of strength, forgiveness, or heartbreak, please subscribe. Your support helps me keep telling the stories that need to be heard. It happened on a Wednesday. The sun had barely risen when Daniel came in, eyes bloodshot, pockets empty. He didn't look at her when he said, "Pack your things." "Why?" she asked softly. He avoided her gaze. "You'll be staying with someone for a while." "A friend." Mara's stomach turned. "A friend?" He sighed. "He's a good man. He'll take care of you. We need the money, Mara. You'll just work for him a bit, and then I'll come get you." But his voice cracked on the last words, the kind of crack that comes when even a liar can't lie anymore. When they reached the edge of the town, the man was already waiting, older, well-dressed, eyes calm in a way that unnerved her. He handed Daniel an envelope. Daniel didn't even count it. He just muttered, "Take care of her," and walked away. Mara didn't cry. Not when Daniel disappeared down the road. Not when the man led her to the carriage. Not even when she realized that she hadn't packed a single personal thing. Because what do you pack when you don't belong anywhere anymore? The man said little on the journey. He sat across from her, his hand resting on a cane polished by time. "My name is Elias," he said finally. "I'm not what he told you I am." She stared at him warily. "Then what are you?" "A businessman. And a widower. So why buy me?" He smiled sadly. "Because sometimes saving someone looks a lot like buying them, at least to people like him." She looked out the window, rain streaking the glass. "You don't know what kind of man he is." "I know the kind of woman you are," Elias said gently. "The kind who still defended him, even now." Mara said nothing. They reached a large house outside the city, not a mansion, but built with care. He led her inside where the fire was already lit. "There's a guest room upstairs," he said. "You'll stay there. You're not here to work. You're here to rest." She frowned. "You're not going to—" Elias shook his head. "No, you've been taken enough." Her eyes filled without permission. She turned away quickly, hiding her face in the shadow of the staircase. That night, for the first time in years, she slept without fear. But sleep didn't bring peace. It brought memories. Daniel's laughter before it turned cruel. The sound of coins clinking on the table. The look on his face when he walked away. In the darkness, Mara whispered to herself, "I wasn't worth the money." From the hallway came a quiet voice. "You were never the price. You were the lesson." She sat up sharply. Elias stood there, half hidden by the doorway, holding a candle. "I couldn't sleep," he said softly. "The rain gets louder at night." Mara looked at him. This man who hadn't touched her, hadn't demanded anything, and yet somehow saw right through her. And for the first time, she wondered what kind of world it would be if kindness didn't have to surprise her. The days that followed felt strange. Not because Mara was in a new house, but because no one demanded anything from her. There was no shouting, no chores waiting before sunrise, no footsteps pacing outside her door. For the first time in years, silence wasn't something to fear. She woke when she wanted, ate when she was hungry, and walked in the garden whenever she needed to breathe. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was all temporary, that at any moment, Elias would knock on her door and reveal what he truly wanted. But he never did. He spent most of his time in his study, surrounded by books and paperwork. Sometimes he forgot to eat, and she'd bring him food just to have something to do. He'd look up, smile politely, and say, "You don't have to, Mara." And she'd always answer the same way, "I know." Before we go on, if stories like this one remind you that kindness can be powerful, don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts that need them. One morning, she found him sitting in the garden, hands resting on his cane, staring at the fountain that no longer worked. "Why do you keep it?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Because broken things still remind me of what they used to sound like." Mara hesitated. "Do you ever fix them?" "Sometimes," he said. "But not everything that's broken needs to be repaired. Some things just need to be seen." She thought about that for the rest of the day. No one had ever seen her before, not as a person, not as something worth keeping even when damaged. That evening, she found the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her since the first day. "Why did you bring me here, Elias?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because I saw the way he looked at you," he said. "Like you were a thing to trade. I couldn't watch that happen again." Mara's voice trembled. "But you paid for me." "I paid to stop him," Elias replied. "Not to own you." Weeks turned into months. The house no longer felt like a stranger's. She began cooking again, not out of duty, but because Elias forgot to. She found his shirts half-ironed and finished them without realizing why. He left books on the kitchen table and told her about the people in them, and she listened, laughing quietly when he forgot names. One night, during dinner, he asked, "If you could go anywhere, where would you go?" She smiled sadly. "I've never been anywhere. I wouldn't know how to choose." "Then we'll start small," he said. "We'll go to the market tomorrow." The market. Such a simple thing, but it made her heart race like it was a faraway land. The next day, they walked through the narrow streets together. People stared, some with curiosity, some with judgment. A well-dressed man and a quiet woman in plain clothes. Mara kept her eyes down, used to stares that burned. But Elias noticed and said, "Look up. People only have power if you give it to them." She lifted her chin slowly. The sky was bluer than she remembered, and for the first time in years, she smiled in public without apology. Later, as they walked home, Elias said something that made her stop in her tracks. "I read something once," he said softly. "It said that love doesn't always arrive as desire. Sometimes it arrives as safety." She looked at him, unsure if he meant her. He didn't meet her eyes. He just added quietly, "You deserve to feel safe, Mara, even if it's never with me." That night, she cried quietly, not from sadness, but from the ache of finally being treated gently. She realized something she never had before. Love wasn't supposed to feel like fear. And in the stillness of that night, Mara made herself a silent promise. She would never again let anyone decide her worth. Spring came quietly that year. The air softened, the garden bloomed again, and the fountain that had been silent for years began to trickle faintly after a heavy rain. Mara watched the water flow and realized she had changed too, slowly, silently, but completely. She had stopped counting the days. She no longer woke waiting for orders or walked fearing footsteps. Her silence wasn't fear anymore. It was peace. Elias had given her space, not walls. And somehow, in that space, she had found herself again. But peace has a way of being tested. One morning, as she returned from the market, she saw a familiar figure waiting by the gate. A face she never thought she'd see again. Daniel. He looked thinner, older, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes wild. "Mara," he said, his voice cracking. "You look good." She froze. For a moment, all the old feelings came rushing back. Confusion, guilt, fear. But they dissolved as quickly as they came. "What do you want, Daniel?" she asked calmly. He swallowed hard. "I made a mistake, Mara. I was desperate. I thought he'd take care of you, that maybe he'd—" "By me?" she interrupted, her tone sharp but steady. He flinched. "No, I didn't know what else to do." "You sold me," she said. "There's nothing else to call it." "Mara, please," he begged. "Come back." "I'm different now. We can start over." She stared at him. This man who once owned every piece of her life, and realized how small he looked now. He was still speaking, but she barely heard the words. Because for the first time, she truly understood. She didn't owe him an answer. "Daniel," she said softly, "I hope one day you learn the difference between needing someone and deserving them." And then she turned and walked inside. Elias was waiting in the garden. He had seen the exchange from the window but hadn't interrupted. When she reached him, he simply asked, "Are you all right?" Mara nodded. "Yes. For the first time, I think I am." He smiled gently. "Good. You don't have to run anymore." "I'm not running," she said. "I'm choosing." There was a long silence between them, comfortable, understanding. Then she said, "Elias, you've given me more kindness than anyone ever has. But I can't stay forever." He nodded slowly, his eyes kind. "I know. I need to find out who I am when I'm not someone's wife, or someone's debt, or someone's rescue." Elias looked at her for a moment, then reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. Inside was money, not a fortune, just enough to begin again. He smiled softly. "For your first choice." Her eyes filled. "You don't have to—" "I know," he said, echoing her old words, "but I want to." The next morning, Mara packed a small bag, this time by choice. At the door, Elias said, "You'll always have a place here." She smiled. "You gave me one when I didn't have a name anymore." "I won't forget that." As she stepped into the sunlight, the wind carried the faint sound of the fountain behind her. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. For the first time in her life, Mara wasn't someone's possession, someone's burden, or someone's secret. She was her own. Months later, a letter arrived at Elias's house. It was short, written in careful handwriting. "Elias, the sea is louder than I imagined. I've started working at a small school by the coast, teaching children to read. They remind me that even broken voices can learn new words. I am happy. Truly. Thank you for showing me what kindness looks like when it asks for nothing. Mara. Elias read the letter twice and then folded it carefully and placed it beside the fountain. He closed his eyes and whispered. She found her voice. The fountain bubbled gently, like an answer. And somewhere, far away, standing by the sea, Mara whispered to the wind, "Love isn't something you're bought for. It's something you become." And she smiled, not because someone saved her, but because she finally had saved herself. If this story touched your heart, tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you believe love is something we find, or something we build once we've learned who we are? And if you enjoy stories about strength, freedom, and rediscovering self-worth, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Your support helps me keep sharing stories about people who find light after darkness and love after loss.